gotta get that.
And there we are. We are live and kicking for Tavern Talk. Guys, it is episode 30 of Tavern Talk. That's a whole
Look
lots of
out.
Tavern
Look
Talks.
out.
Yeah,
Wow.
nice.
That's at least 30 of them.
At least 30 of them, yeah. So, hello, my name is Colin. Welcome to episode 30 of Roll by Roll's Tavern Talk, a show where we, the Roll by Roll gang, discuss various aspects of running a great D&D campaign based on our experiences with D&D 5e and our current adventures in Emathan homebrew campaign. So, joining me tonight, rest of the Roll by Roll crew, we have Egan, who plays Douglin. Good evening, sir.
Thanks for having me. Good
And we have
evening.
Max, who plays Kogon. Welcome, Max.
That's me. Thank you.
That's
And you can
you.
trust us because we're on the internet.
Absolutely, you can trust us.
Yep.
So, our
Yep.
current adventures in Emathan campaign pulls heavily from character backstories. So, we were chatting a little bit about a topic, and Egan suggested maybe we talk a little bit about using character backstories, creating backstories, and how those can add or even take away from your campaign if you're not careful about it. So, going to start off, Max. I'm going to throw you into this one right out of the gate. Um, so, tell us a little bit about how you create a character backstory, and I'm going to put in there: is it build before story, story before build, or does that sort of depend?
Um, I suppose it's technically build before story, but I'll usually have a bit of a almost like a narrative archetype in mind that I'll use to like frame my build around, and then I'll flesh out a backstory more. You know what I mean?
Yep,
So
that makes
like
sense.
Bogon, for example, you know what I mean? Like I was thinking about um someone who's kind of like new to the world, you know what I mean? Like in a sense, right? Like not exposed to much of Emathan and things like that, and pretty much non-magical for the most part. And then I was like, okay, well let's work with that. And then I obviously went down the fighter route and things like that. I knew Dragonborn. I just wanted to play Dragonborn bad, and then based on that, I was like, okay, so how can I flesh this out and make it make sense? And that's where I went from there, basically. So
Yeah, I
I'd say
like.
in most cases, I
Yeah,
do it
Max.
that
One
way.
thing I like is you play Kogon very well to that perception of the world. I
Yeah.
really like that, to that backstory where
Yeah.
so many things that Kogon is being exposed to out there might have heard about them, might not have, but like it's so much is new to him, right?
Yeah.
And he often takes the time to talk to Douglin like I didn't know this thing existed. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah,
cool.
that's how I usually build characters for sure. Or backstories is builds first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yourself, Egan?
Um, I I've done it both ways, for lack of a better term. I think what I prefer though is to have at least a baseline of what my class will be. I think it's important to kind of have that framework, and then from there I kind of roll back from there. And I usually with backstories I try to answer some questions, right? Why is my character adventuring? What's the reason that he gets out of the tavern and on the road to fame, fortune, revenge, whatever the case may be? So I would say that I build and then I do the backstory and then sort of backfill any other build that needs from the backstory. So, if he has a certain power, for example, that I didn't realize when I picked the class, I'll try to implement that on how he achieved that, how he received that power, at least as the first level. Or, like, for example, I played a barbarian that I knew was going to be a path of wild magic. I built that into a backstory that would come out, but there would be hints of it beforehand. So class vis-a-vis build, and then from there fill in the backstory to answer questions, motivation, and whatnot. That's how I do it.
Yeah. Um, I think the 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 campaign, and I'm going to kind of roll right into this. I think the campaign can often drive that decision making a little bit
Yeah, for sure.
for the players, because I think it's important early on that the group agrees how dominant the character backstories are going to be in terms of the overarching story. So,
Mhm.
you may make a decision very early on that character backstories aren't that important to the stories. There may be just a few key things the DM says, know these things about your characters, because they may come up, and I can see how if that was the case, then you may just focus solely on build, or you may be a D&D geek like myself and write a 45-page backstory regardless, because it's important
Not
to
that one.
you, and that's the way you play the character, but it's when we first got together with the group, and it's been too long now for me without thinking a little bit hard to remember who we were then. But
Younger us's.
yeah, younger us's. We talked about the campaign ahead of time, and with Adventures in Emathan, we decided that character backstories were going to be a big driving part of the story. There would still be an overarching story that was going on, but we would I would consciously drive a lot of story around the overarching storyline that came out of character backgrounds. And I love doing that. I think it's fantastic. It's part of the reason we're talking about it tonight. I think it adds an awful lot. So asking you guys, we'll go through um, some ideas we have around how you can tie those backstories in, that sort of thing. Max, you wanna roll with that?
You're saying as a DM or as a
Both. So
player?
as a DM, but
Okay.
then also, as a player, there's things that you can do that
Yeah.
both work for and against that sort of thing, right?
I'll start with a player perspective. I would, I don't mean, it's going to sound weird because I'm going to say advise against, okay? But like, I would advise against expositing your backstory. So that means like speaking out all your details. Do you know what I mean? Just keep those internalized, review your backstory often, and just don't inner monologue ever. You know what I mean? Like just if something comes up where something of your backstory is going to come out in like the way you react to something or how you speak to someone, just anything like that, I think that's more exciting for everyone.
Yep.
Like, where the fuck did that come from?
Yeah.
Or like, what? Like, why is he like that doesn't seem like normal for that person. You know
Why
what I
did he
mean? Anything
react
like
that
that,
way?
anything that'll get other characters, player characters to want to engage with you, you know what I mean? Is better than you just being like, it's an ego check because you want to be your star of your show, you know what I mean? And you want to, deliver all the cool backstory shit you came up with, but man, you should really internalize it and make it your own. And then so from a DM perspective, I've always encouraged my players to make backstories, but I've always been like, give me like the three key memories of your life
Yeah.
and something that shaped them into who they are coming into this adventure, and we'll go from there. Anything else you want to make, we'll get to maybe eventually. I don't need it now. It's too much information now, kind of thing. You know what I mean? And it's like that those kind of important details are great. But if they want to like write a 20-page backstory, that's fine. I'm not going
Yeah.
to read it.
Just don't get
You know what I
hurt
mean?
if I can't get
Yeah,
all of
yeah,
that in the campaign,
exactly.
right?
So I
Yeah.
just want these things to get us rolling and then, if you have your epic backstory, that's awesome. ask for more details, or if you have something you really want involved, like let me know. You know what I mean? That's I think healthier for the DM to manage than having like 100 pages of four characters' backstories and like trying to like interweave everything, and it also takes the pressure off of like having to do everything. You know what I mean? Because it not everything is going to gel either. You're going to be going through different players' things, and it's like, okay, I got to have a sit down here. This is getting too crazy. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
yeah, I
You
just
know,
start
I've
small.
heard what you were talking about earlier. Max referred to in terms of a DM in the world, but I think it relates to this, to a character's backstory. Is show me your backstory,
Yeah,
don't tell me your backstory.
Mm.
Right? So the things
yeah,
that are in your if they come up naturally within within the session, that's great. But like you said, don't sit there for 3 minutes and monologue your back
yeah,
history because
No,
you want to tell everybody all the cool things you wrote,
yeah.
right?
yeah, for sure.
Egan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm gonna sort of start where Max left off, and that is communication with your DM, and then as a DM with your player about expectations, because there is a huge difference between a packaged adventure, Storm King's Thunder, where it's all played out with, and if the DM wants to add, then great, versus what we're doing with Adventures in Emathan, because Adventures in Emathan is player built. We talked about it. Yes, you have an overarching thing, but we're not 20th level. We've got to get there. And to fill in some of those, you need some backstory and player buy-in. So first thing, communicate, right? But as far as like from a player's perspective, I like to answer some questions as I mentioned before, and how I think they're useful also for the DM is, why am I hitting the road? Okay, how did I become exceptional, right? Because I'm not a villager, I'm a bard, I'm a thief, I'm a fighter that has exceptional skills. Well, maybe just touch on how you got those, and 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 then maybe find also what is your goal. What is, yes, you want fame and fortune, great, that would be fine. I think though, as a player, if you are able to dive a little bit into a backstory, you really personalize your character. They become yours. You get so attached to them
Oh yeah,
instead of just a guy rolling dice and killing and getting XP. You start to really care about this character because they're becoming more. They're more than, again, just some words on a page and stuff like that. From the DM perspective, I like it because it does help me with even small encounters. Colin, you did this with Ben Voce and Storm King's Thunder when you had that girl show up that wanted to buy his loot, his favored loot, and it wasn't really part of the story. It was just almost like an Easter egg, right? It was just a little like, all right, I hear you. And that's, again, that was a packaged adventure that you flavored, right?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was so awesome. It's something I still remember. So you can really enrich a game experience on both sides as a DM and as a player if you're able to tap into backstory things. And yes, don't write a novel. You can have a few paragraph story that gets your point across. And I think if you're able to do that, maybe follow it up with some bullet points for the DM. So it's a little bit easier because they got plenty to worry about prepping for a session. They can't sit there and work through 37 pages. Just not going to happen. So,
Yeah. So I think we talked about this before because unfortunately we never got back around to that with Ben, but
yep.
that she was a succubus. Did we get to
oh
that?
wow.
We didn't know it at the time,
Yeah, I
and
think we talked
unfortunately, we
about
never
it
got to play it
afterwards.
again. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, but it was like, I mean, you played on everything about Ben, and it was, personalized within a packaged adventure. It adds so much to it. I mean, those that really deep you know, embrace the role playing side of this, we try to, I'm going to say humanize, we humanoidize our characters. We try to have actions based on their motivations and who they are, but you're not going to know who they are unless they have some type of history, something to fall back on. You mentioned Kogon. I mean, he is playing Kogon fantastically. And the way he interacts is based on that, right? And you're not getting out of that because then now all of a sudden you're just playing to optimize something. Oh, well, Kogan doesn't know it, but Max does. Then you kind of you break the fourth wall, I guess, for
Oh
lack of
yeah.
a better term. So,
I like the fact that Kogon made the comment about how he didn't really like Undead to Declan. It's like I don't like. I've never
yeah,
seen them before. I don't like
yeah,
them. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. He
yeah,
has a very heart to heart
Yeah,
discussion with
I'm gonna
Declan.
say
yeah,
I really hate the undead.
yeah. Go ahead. You stand behind me, big guy. I got it.
Yeah, so a
Yeah.
couple of things there I wanna speak to Egan that you so I think you absolutely you can use backstories in prepared adventures. Um, it's a little harder, because it's difficult to fit them in without getting in the way of a lot of prepared adventures because
Mhm.
a lot of them have I don't want to say they railroad you through, but they have a very defined path that you have to follow. They might give you the option to go ABC or ADC or AEC, but you got to get to C eventually to keep
Yeah.
going. Yeah, I mean Storm King's
ACDC.
Thunder is a perfect example, right? I mean it's a sandbox, it's very open, there's lots of room, but you're still progressing through that module in ways that limits what you can do. But I mean, I think we had some fun throwing backstory in when it worked, and it made for some, you know, we veered from the path sometimes, but we always got back to where we were going. The other thing you touched on around backstories. So, as a DM, I think you need to give some thought, especially if it's a homebrew campaign, on what details you would like from the players. So you mentioned some of them, like maybe you want to know who their family is. Like both of you, as part of your backstories, laid out your families, which are great. That gives me great stuff. Where they're from, again, both of you have a very defined place you're from, and that gives me lots of great material in terms of going to and utilizing that particular area. Um, you said these already. What what did well? You said why did they become an adventure, but you can also get into what did they do before they became an adventure, and both of you have those pieces in your backstory, which is great because that creates sort of a history that
Yeah,
you can
grounds them.
lean into about that
Yeah.
character. um, if they have any secrets, um,
That's a big
and
one.
yeah, and one of the things you can do as a DM, if those things are important to you, is just create a prompt sheet. Like
Yeah.
just say who are their family, where are they from, like all those questions, and just have the party write that stuff out. They can still, like you were saying, Max, they can expand on that ad nauseum if they want to. But these are the things that I need to know for the campaign,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To kind of make sure you have the particular type of ammunition you're looking for. Max, what else? What else about backstories?
What else about backstories? I don't know. Thoughts.
I got some. Do you want me to
Okay.
jump
Yeah.
in?
Yeah. You
All right.
gotta. Yeah, obviously.
I You could also look at it, you know how we talked about flaws in another episode, leaning into flaws and whatnot. I distinctly remember two in particular, one with Ben, one with oh God, what was Nathan's character? Basically he had a penchant for gold, and no matter what, if he saw gold, he kind of triggered him, and he would just go after it, even if it was to the detriment of whatever the adventure or the quest was.
Hmm.
Ben's backstory, he had a visceral hate, that an irrational hate for the Zentarum. And if he ever saw Zentarum at any time, he would flip out. He would flip out and immediately attack, and it almost got the group in trouble. So those are, characteristics that drove, it's a backstory that drove action, right?
Cool.
Leaning into the flaws, but also like role playing that out, because now, like, and you can let the DM know, there's a barbarian that if he sees a certain orc, there's some that have that no matter what, they're going to do it. So now the DM can place that and see what happens. Like, with Ben, there was like, it almost got the group thrown in jail, if I'm not mistaken. Like the whole town was like, what's going on with this guy? He just went insane. And so I think that just adds so much flavor to it. And at the end of the day, that part wasn't that complicated. It really was sort of a bullet point. This dude will freak out if he sees Zuntarum. So as a DM, you're sitting there going, let me see how I can put this in a
Where
very,
can I get
it's a
Zentarum in front of him?
yeah, let me challenge the group based on that. And it's mostly just the fun to see how it turns out. So leaning on flaws to me is as much a part of backstories and how they affect characters. So
I got some now.
there you go.
Go, do it.
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about when you were talking about the modules and how it can be tougher to work in backstories. And I think a lot of that is because the modules are really often, anyways, written and designed for less experienced DMs, and that's why they're so structured that way.
Yes.
But I think
Yep.
that can be a good reason to start learning to incorporate backstories because you're forced to kind of take bite-sized pieces and work with them. And because I would recommend that anyways if you
Mm-hmm.
were starting a homebrew, you know what I mean? So if you are using or planning to use a pre-written module, I'd say just pre-read your module before you get your characters or players to make characters, and then just give them a few lines to color in for creating their backstory. You know what I mean? And just you can put limits on all that for whatever you need to tailor to you because ultimately the DM as the DM the backstories are what you allow. So, if your players aren't on board with that, then they could find another group. You know what I mean? Or they can just bite the bullet and be like, well, at least I get to have some backstory involved in this. It might not be everything I want, but it's something. You know what I mean? And I think it's a good way to get started.
I really like that, Max. I think that because it is significantly harder to work backstories into a prepared adventure. So forcing yourself to do that within a prepared adventure, when you get into a homebrew situation, it's going to be way easier because you
Yeah.
don't have the constraints, and you can push things whatever direction you want. So for example, in our homebrew, we did a lot of exploration around Kogon's story and where that led the party. Still with the ties to everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
But when we were in Storm King's Thunder, I know I had to work a lot harder to find openings to work the backstories into, and it definitely it makes you better at it because your opportunities are smaller, they're a little bit tighter. You got to be careful you don't rock the main storyline inadvertently. And yeah, I really like that. I think that's a great way to work on adding backstories into your overall story. Egan.
Yeah, I also think too, from a DM perspective, is don't worry about being perfect about it.
that,
It's,
that goes with all things DMing.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I do think that a lot of DMs get hooked up like, oh my God, they gave me a backstory. I gotta work that into the
Yeah.
adventure no matter what. And no, little things too. I mean, I know from a player perspective, again, I still loved the little, bits and pieces during Storm King's Thunder that were thrown my way. And it's to me it it is so much more immersive from a player standpoint. And I hope I can, share that as a DM to bring another level to this. I keep saying, yes, you can roll up a character and you can fight everything and have a blast doing it, no doubt. But try also doing it this way, where you know your character. It's more than just numbers and words on a page. It can be truly satisfying. And work with the DM, and as a DM, work with your players because it's worth it.
Well, I mean, you guys have to admit when we're playing the game, you guys are your characters.
Oh my God, yeah.
Like
I
you're right
think,
there in you're right there in the
yeah,
mindset of your
yeah,
character, right?
yeah. I mean, we've talked about this. We have a chat on Discord that's an in-game chat. I literally think in an accent.
Oh
I
yeah,
literally
yeah,
do.
I do too when I'm
I
writing.
am that guy when
Yeah.
I'm writing it out. So, in fact, hey, wait, Douglas would totally not use that word. That's way too sophisticated for him. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but no,
Yeah.
it's great. It's so much fun.
I have one more point I'd like to make as
Absolutely,
well.
sir.
A little tip for players, if I may, because I'm an expert because I'm on the internet, and uh,
Over 30 shows to
yeah,
prove it.
30 episodes. Well, I've been a part of like 16 or something, but anyways, I think that if you're in a maybe a bit of a more conservative group, shyer maybe, who knows, right? People aren't engaging as much. The best thing you can do if you want some of your backstory to come out is to ask people about their backstory in game. You know what I mean? As characters, just take off. Just try to be as selfless as possible. Just be like, have the mindset of I don't care if anyone knows anything about my backstory. I just want to find out about these guys, and then you'll still have a ton of fun, and eventually your stuff's gonna come out. It just is. You know what I mean? And I think that's a great way if you can be the icebreaker in your group. You know what I mean? Because I think that's kind of a pitfall of a lot of groups is they're just like everyone's focused on themselves and on the next combat that comes along and what the DM throws in front of them. And a lot of players don't um, invite each other into conversation. Do you know what I mean? They're always waiting for the DM to
Yeah,
start something, you know?
yeah,
Yeah,
So,
well, one of the things I think we do really well, and I just love to make the space for this, is with the skyship, you guys are sailing around, and I always say anything you
yep,
guys want to
yeah,
talk
exactly.
about, and just
yep,
Yeah,
give you the room
yep.
yeah,
to be your characters, and that's like you're saying there, Max. That's those opportunities for the show to come out about your
yeah,
backstory where
yeah,
something comes up and a discussion and you start to see a little bit of the backstory. I remember
Mhm.
back when you guys took a an airship
yeah.
from
Different.
Vargas to Nome, and that was the first time that Kogon showed how he loves to cook, and he
Yep,
cooked up all these meals and stuff like that. So
yep.
that was
Yeah.
really cool.
It's like the first day of school, right? Where you're
Yeah, it kind
shy,
of
you
is.
don't know anybody,
Yeah,
and then by the second week, you're like, having a
yeah,
great time. That's how, but how do you get there?
yeah,
By showing people your backstory.
yeah,
That's how you do it.
Yeah, and I mean it good backstories. Even if even if the DM is struggling to pull the backstory into the story, a good backstory can still really add to how the character
yeah,
is in the
Yeah,
world, right? Because
yeah,
you sort of have that idea ahead of time. Because I'm sure we've all been into a campaign where, you know, Billy Bob the Fighter, you have no idea who Billy Bob the Fighter is, but ten sessions in, just through play, you kind of figured out who Billy Bob the Fighter is. You just kind of developed this character. Well, all we're saying is, why don't you do that ahead of time and bring that into the campaign, right?
hmm
I think that can be, um,
Can I also piggyback on that real quick?
yeah,
That is a great point too, is you don't have to though write it all.
Nope.
Yeah, yeah.
If
Give
you
yourself
leave a
room to grow.
little,
Yeah,
like, yeah, just enough here and there, you can always sort of, and it's not even retconning at all. It's fleshing out.
yeah,
And it could take 10 episodes for Billy Bob to realize that, you know what, he paid spiders. You can turn it into canon or whatnot.
yeah,
So have a good one, but you don't have to do everything for
yeah.
a backstory.
If something
Just
hasn't
enough.
been exposed yet, then
Yeah,
it's not real yet. You can
No,
always
you can
change it.
you
yeah,
can add to your
Message your DM.
yeah.
Actually, can we change this for a
yeah.
yeah.
This will work, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
dude.
nothing to
Yeah,
say that your backstory is signed, sealed, delivered before the campaign starts.
Yeah,
Give
for sure.
yourself a good starting point, but
yeah.
absolutely add to it as time goes on, or even work with the DM and say, I know I put this in the backstory I sent you, but I'd like to change it a little bit to this for this reason. If it's something
Yeah.
that hasn't come out and matters at that
Yeah,
point, go for
exactly.
it.
World of magic. We can make it happen.
Yeah, Nathan's character suddenly hated snakes.
Yeah, it was an
Like
awesome
never
episode
was.
too.
He refused to go into this place that had snakes, and
Yep.
everybody else had to go in there, and they got in trouble. And his character's like, I can't go in there.
I
Like
can't do it. I
I
can't
can't
do
do
it.
it.
It
Yeah.
That's
was
awesome.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, so for myself, I'm gonna finish off my thoughts. You guys can, and we've alluded to this. Work with the DM on your backstory. Um, Work with other players. At the
Yes.
beginning of Adventure in Emathan, we actually had two players who interwoven part of their backstory that came to play right in the very beginning of the campaign, which was, I don't know, it worked as well as we hoped, but I thought it was neat that they had
It
worked
was a
together
start. Yeah.
to kind of weave their stories together a little bit. Um, yeah, I think that's particularly important in a homebrew campaign to work with your DM because the DM likely needs to create details around your backstory, right? So an example would be, one of the players is like, okay, I I need to know where my character's from. Like what do I call
Yeah.
that place? And
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
yeah,
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, I'll figure that out for you.
Yeah.
And I need to kind of know a region that he's from. So we kind of worked on
yeah,
that a little bit, stuff like that, because that just helps. That helps make sure the DM can work with your backstory without inadvertently putting constraints on the campaign. Like, oh, now I've created this area and I wish it wasn't that. So,
yeah.
it just gives the DM a little bit of wiggle room there. Max, final thoughts on backstories?
Final thoughts. Yeah, personally, I would say keep it simple to start with. That includes DMs asking for backstories and players creating backstories. I think that gives you the most flexibility to expand and develop. And as I'm fond of saying, you just need enough to get started, right? So, but it depends on your group. If you're all old hats and played together for a long time, then yeah, feel free to go wild, I guess, But if you're starting out or if it's a new group, things like that, I'd say keep it simple. That's usually my big advice.
Ruby? Egan?
I would agree with that. I would say you can keep it simple to begin, but look for opportunities to expand on it. As Colin just said, just because you started with only one flaw or backstory segment does not mean you cannot cultivate that as you play. And if there's opportunities to speak with the DM or another player, um, you have the opportunity to kind of create that moving forward as well. For my part, I think it is truly enjoyable. I think it makes my character more real, but that's me.
Cracky
There's
knees and
no,
all.
yeah, oh yeah. Unfortunately, a little too close to the heart there, and yeah, and Colin throwing a freaking marriage proposal at Douglin's daughter.
Awesome.
That's when backstory goes wrong.
Oh no, that's when
Uh,
backstory gets ultra sweet.
oh,
I
it's
mean, it
awesome.
deleted one of my backup character ideas, but that's okay.
Yeah.
A love
Lieutenant
interest of
Arden.
Maggie's.
Oh man.
Yeah, I had an idea for a Gith and Thor love interest of Maggie.
Oh,
So if he joined the party, he like would worship Douglin, you know what I mean? But Douglin doesn't know. Like Maggie and him are keeping it a secret. But like so he's like, why is this kid always so nice to me, this Gith and Thor kid guy? And like, yeah, anyways, that was gonna be the thing.
that's the last time I have a
Kogon lives,
daughter.
so we're not going down that road. Kogon's
Yes, at least not yet.
So my final thought is super simple. Just remember every backstory. Your character is not the Prince of Persia,
Yeah.
with endless wealth. But now he's a first level fighter here in the
Right,
adventure. Like
right.
keep. I think you guys you did a fantastic job of flavoring their former life, giving them a really good reason why they're in the campaign, and lots of great stuff to work with. So it's a lot of fun for me. I love pulling pieces. Um, actually, this just popped in my head. One thing as a DM you can do to keep that backstory rolling. I do this occasionally with you guys. Is what's 3 or 4 goals for your character right now,
Yeah,
and that
yeah,
that helps me see where their backstory is sort of developing, so that I can continue to work that stuff into it. So
yeah.
we better wrap her up. Spend another quick 40 minutes, as we always seem to be able to really easily do. So we'll call that a wrap for episode 30 of Roll by Roll's Tavern Talk. Hopefully, anyone watching has enjoyed tonight's topic. So, Tavern Talks occur the Wednesday after each of our Saturday night Adventures in Emathan sessions. Our next session is scheduled for the 17th. And that looks like that will be our last session before our break as I move into another little execution window of my work. We'll be back November, pick things up and roll with them. So to end the episode, we'll offer a cheers as we do. Thanks for joining us in the tavern, and hopefully you can join us again next time. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Cheers.
And I will sign out. Thanks very much.